Keanu Reeves left his safe wide open, thinking he was testing his maid's honesty. But when she found a single document inside, her hands began to shake, and her eyes filled with tears. Why was her late husband's name marked neutralized in Keanu's private files, and what deadly secret had just been uncovered? Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The early morning light spilled through the tall windows of Keanu Reeves's home office, washing the room in a quiet gold. Outside, Los Angeles was just waking up. Inside, everything was still. The air was scented faintly with polished wood and the faint trace of cedar from the shelves. Keanu sat at his desk, unmoving, his eyes fixed on the corner of the room. The antique safe stood there like a silent sentinel, massive and heavy, its iron door gleaming faintly in the sunlight. It had been in his possession for years, a gift from an old friend who collected rare vintage locks. Normally it was closed tight. Today it would be different. He rubbed his thumb along the edge of the key in his palm, remembering the conversation from 2 nights before. A fellow actor, someone Keanu had known for decades, had leaned across the dinner table and told him quietly about recent thefts in the homes of celebrities. The thieves were not strangers. They were people who had been trusted, cleaners, assistants, even long-term staff. It wasn't the first time Keanu had heard such stories, but hearing it from someone he respected had planted a seed in his mind. He felt wrong to even consider it. He had always prided himself on trusting those who worked in his home. Nadia had been his housekeeper for 3 years. She was meticulous, discreet, and unfailingly polite. She treated his home like it was her own. But the words from his friend lingered. You never really know someone until temptation is in front of them. The thought made him uneasy. He wanted to believe he knew Nadia's character, but another part of him, the part that had learned from a lifetime of unpredictable human behavior, wanted certainty. Today, he would create an opportunity for that certainty to emerge. He rose from his desk and crossed the room to the safe. The metal was cool under his hand as he turned the heavy dial, feeling each click under his fingertips. The lock yielded with a deep, resonant sound, and the door swung open with a slow, deliberate motion. Inside, the contents were arranged with almost obsessive precision. Stacks of bills, crisp and neatly banded. Folders with contracts, some marked confidential. A small black leather notebook that he rarely took out, holding his private reflections and notes from years on set. A silver watch in its case. An envelope sealed in red wax. He took one step back, surveying the open vault. Anyone who walked in would know instantly that this was valuable. He left everything exactly as it was. The real test was not in hiding the wealth, but in seeing how someone behaved when it was laid bare. He crossed to the bookshelf on the opposite wall and pulled out a heavy volume of Shakespeare's collected works. Behind it, set into the back panel of the shelf, was a tiny black lens. He angled it carefully toward the safe, then tapped the side to confirm the feed was active. A small red light blinked once before vanishing. This was the part he didn't like, the part that felt almost like betrayal. Watching someone without their knowledge went against every instinct he had about respecting people's privacy. But if his friend's warning had any truth, this was the only way to know for certain. Keanu checked the feed on his tablet. The image from the hidden camera was sharp, capturing the open safe in full view. The stream was stable, showing every detail, from the patterned carpet beneath it to the small reflection of sunlight glinting off the stacks of cash. He slipped the tablet into a leather messenger bag, grabbed his keys, and walked out to the driveway. The morning was bright, but there was a strange heaviness in his chest, a sense of crossing a line he couldn't uncross. He wasn't sure if it was guilt or anticipation. Sliding into the driver's seat of his vintage black Porsche, he pulled out of the gate but didn't drive far. 2 blocks down, he eased into a shaded spot beneath a sprawling jacaranda tree. The blossoms above scattered purple petals onto the windshield, but he barely noticed. He set the parking brake, adjusted the seat, and opened the tablet again. The live feed filled the screen. From here, he could see the front hall through a separate security camera. It was empty now, but in less than 15 minutes, Nadia would arrive. She always came early, starting her day with the kitchen before moving through the rest of the house. He'd seen her routine enough times to know exactly how long it took for her to reach the office. His fingers tapped restlessly on the steering wheel. He told himself this was just a harmless check, a one-time thing to silence his doubts. Still, a part of him feared what he might see. If Nadia failed this test, it wouldn't just be about losing a housekeeper. It would mean losing the quiet trust that made his home feel like a sanctuary. The minutes crept by with the slow weight of a rehearsal before a difficult scene. Finally, the front door opened. On the split-screen view, Nadia stepped inside, dressed neatly in a pale blue blouse and dark slacks, her hair pulled back. She carried her cleaning tote in one hand and a grocery bag in the other, probably fresh fruit for the kitchen, as she sometimes did. Keanu leaned forward slightly. She moved through the kitchen, setting down the bag and beginning her work. He saw her rinse a small bundle of grapes, place them in a glass bowl, and cover them with a cloth. She worked methodically, without hurry, humming softly to herself. Eventually, she left the kitchen and walked down the hall toward the office. Keanu felt his pulse quicken. The open safe was waiting like a silent question. She stepped into the room, and for a moment, the camera caught her from the side. She froze. Her posture shifted, back straight, shoulders stiff. Her eyes locked on the safe. Keanu could almost feel the sudden tension in the air through the screen. She took a slow step forward, then another, until she was standing directly in front of it. She didn't reach for the money. She didn't move at all. Her hands hovered slightly at her sides, trembling. On the tablet screen, Keanu saw Nadia's gaze drop from the stacks of money to the other contents of the safe. Her expression was unreadable at first, something between confusion and disbelief. Then her eyes stopped on the black leather notebook. Her lips parted slightly, and she drew in a slow breath. It was as if everything else inside the safe had vanished from her awareness. She reached out, her fingers hovering just an inch above the notebook, not yet touching it. Her hand shook. Keanu's brow furrowed. He had expected curiosity, maybe even a momentary temptation toward the cash. But this reaction was different. It was personal. Almost emotional. She stepped back suddenly, her hand retreating to her side as though she'd touched something hot. Then she turned in a small circle, glancing toward the doorway as if to be sure she was alone. Slowly, she leaned forward again and lifted the notebook from the shelf. The leather creaked faintly as she opened it. Her eyes scanned the first page, then the second. Whatever she saw, it made her shoulders stiffen. Then came the change. Her breathing quickened, her free hand pressed lightly against her lips, her fingers trembling. She turned another page, and Keanu saw her eyes begin to glisten. From the driver's seat, his own chest tightened. He had no idea what in those pages could cause that reaction. He had kept the notebook for years, jotting down scattered thoughts, memories from film sets, sketches of ideas, even personal reflections he never shared with anyone. Nothing in it, as far as he could recall, would be connected to her. Yet on the screen, Nadia was clearly struggling to compose herself. She closed the notebook carefully, almost reverently, and set it back exactly where it had been. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at it, as though it were something sacred or dangerous. Then, unexpectedly, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. She dabbed at her eyes, straightened her blouse, and turned away from the safe. But instead of leaving the office, she walked to the window and stood there for several seconds, her face hidden from the camera's view. Keanu's mind raced. He had planned this to be a straightforward check, an easy reassurance of trust. Now he was left with a mystery he couldn't explain. What could possibly be inside that notebook that would cause her to react like that? Finally, Nadia stepped back into the hallway, returning to her cleaning routine as though nothing had happened. Her movements were deliberate, steady, almost too controlled. Keanu closed the tablet and stared at the empty street ahead of him. He had gotten no answers, only more questions. What had he just witnessed? And why did it feel as though he had stumbled onto something far more complex than a simple test of honesty? The morning sun had climbed higher, but for Keanu the day had taken on a darker shade. The sound of the front door clicking shut echoed faintly through the hallway. Nadia's voice followed, soft and melodic, speaking in Ukrainian as she greeted the house like an old friend. It was something she always did, a small ritual of hers. She believed a home carried the energy of the people in it, and she treated Keanu's place with the same warmth she would her own. Carrying her tote and the grocery bag, she stepped into the kitchen, where she began unpacking with her usual care. She arranged fresh fruit in a bowl, wiped the counters, and set the kettle to boil. Every movement was precise, yet unhurried. In the car down the street, Keanu watched through the split-screen feed. This part felt normal, almost comforting, and for a moment he wondered if he should have just left things as they were. From the kitchen, Nadia made her way down the hallway. She passed the living room, paused briefly to straighten a framed photograph, then headed toward the office. The open safe sat waiting like an unspoken challenge. When she stepped through the doorway, her entire body stilled. The tote slipped slightly on her shoulder as if it had suddenly become heavier. Her gaze fixed on the safe, and in that instant, her expression changed. Softness draining away, replaced by something sharper. It wasn't greed. It wasn't even the cautious interest of someone tempted. It was something deeper. Her brows drew together slightly, and she stood there for several seconds without moving, as though her feet had rooted to the carpet. Her eyes shifted over the contents, not to the neat stacks of cash, not to the gleam of the silver watch. They found the black leather notebook in the back corner of the safe. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and a faint tremor moved through her fingers. She took one slow step forward, then another, her movements careful, almost hesitant. When she reached the safe, she didn't touch anything at first. She just stared, her breathing shallow. Then, just as suddenly, she stepped back. Her hand came up to her mouth, as though to hold in a sound she didn't want to make. Keanu, watching from his car, felt the first pang of doubt about the whole idea. This wasn't the body language of someone calculating what they could take. It was the reaction of someone who had just seen a ghost. Nadia stayed frozen for a long moment, her eyes locked on the notebook like it was something alive. The morning light spilling through the office window caught the faint sheen of moisture gathering in her eyes. She reached forward slowly, her hand trembling, and lifted the notebook from its place. The leather cover flexed under her fingers, its edges worn and softened by years of handling. She opened it just enough to see the first page. Whatever was written there hit her like a sudden drop in temperature. Her face went pale, her breathing turned uneven. She turned the page, scanning quickly, as if she was desperate to confirm something. "It's okay," she said. In the car, Keanu leaned forward over the steering wheel, his eyes narrowing. He had expected maybe a glance, some idle curiosity, and then she would walk away. But this was personal. Nadia closed the notebook halfway and pressed it to her chest for a brief moment, as though it were something precious or dangerous or both. Then she opened it again, flipping to another section. The movement was quick but careful, her thumb lingering on certain pages before moving on. Her lips moved slightly, though no sound reached the camera. It looked like she was whispering something, maybe a name. Then she stiffened, her gaze caught on a particular entry. Her hand came up to cover her mouth, and a soft gasp escaped despite her attempt to contain it. She shut the notebook abruptly, her shoulders rising and falling with each breath. For a few seconds she just held it there, staring down at it as if unsure whether to put it back or run with it. Finally, she returned it to its exact position inside the safe. Her fingers lingered on the cover, giving it a final, almost reluctant touch before letting go. She stepped backward until she was standing in the middle of the office. Her hands went to her sides, but they continued to tremble. Her eyes darted toward the doorway. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them again, her face had shifted into a neutral expression. Keanu recognized that kind of mask. It was the kind people wore when they were trying to hide something they didn't want others to see. And in that moment, his unease deepened into something colder. This wasn't just about honesty anymore. Nadia turned toward the window, standing still for a moment with her back to the safe. She drew in slow, deliberate breaths, as if trying to settle whatever storm had just risen inside her. Her reflection in the glass showed a face that was both strained and haunted. From his car, Keanu felt his stomach tighten. There was no mistaking it now. This was not the reaction of someone thinking about stealing. This was the reaction of someone who had just been blindsided by something personal, something raw. She finally moved, walking toward the desk as if to busy herself. She straightened a stack of papers that didn't need straightening, then adjusted a pen holder by a fraction of an inch. Each gesture was precise, mechanical. Distraction in its purest form. When she left the office, she didn't glance back at the safe, not once. Instead, she moved down the hall to the laundry room, picking up a basket of folded towels. The camera caught her taking another deep breath before she carried them toward the guest bedroom. Keanu leaned back in his seat, exhaling through his nose. He told himself the test was meant to be simple, harmless, a way to silence the doubts that had crept in after a friend's warning. But now, instead of reassurance, he had more questions than he'd started with. Why had she reacted that way? What could possibly be in his notebook that would affect her so strongly? He had owned that safe for years. The notebook was something he rarely looked at himself, an odd collection of handwritten notes, ideas, and personal reflections. It wasn't the kind of thing that should trigger tears or shock in someone who wasn't even supposed to know what was inside. The kettle whistled faintly in the kitchen, and Nadia reappeared briefly to pour herself a cup of tea. She sipped it slowly, her eyes fixed on the steam curling above the mug. She looked calmer now, but the calm had the brittle quality of glass. One wrong touch, and it would shatter. Keanu sat in silence, watching her move through the house with that controlled, deliberate pace. The plan had been to catch a thief. Instead, he might have stumbled into a secret that could change everything. Berlin, and for the first time that morning, he wasn't sure if he wanted to know the truth. The rest of the morning moved with a strange quiet. Nadia completed small tasks, her rhythm steady but restrained, as though part of her mind was elsewhere. Keanu kept watching, thinking she might stay away from the office altogether now, but as the minutes passed, she drifted back toward that room. She entered slowly, pausing in the doorway, as though she was taking in the safe all over again. For a moment, she stood still, then stepped forward with a calm that felt almost deliberate. Her hand went to the black notebook again, but hesitated just above it. Then she reached past it, her fingers brushing against the back wall of the safe. They found something tucked flat against the interior, something Keanu had nearly forgotten was there. She slid it out carefully, a single sheet of cream-colored paper folded neatly in thirds. Even on the small camera feed, Keanu could see it had been handled before. The creases were soft, the corners slightly worn. Nadia unfolded it slowly, her eyes moving across the page. The moment she registered what she was reading, her body shifted. Her breath caught, her jaw tightened. It wasn't the silent sadness of someone finding a memento. It was sharper, more volatile, an emotion caught between grief and fury. Tears welled in her eyes almost instantly, but they didn't fall easily. She blinked hard, fighting to keep her composure, only to lose that battle a second later. A single tear slipped down her cheek. Then another. Her shoulders rose with a sharp inhale, and she pressed her lips together as if she were holding back words she wanted to shout. Keanu's brows knit together. He had no idea what could provoke that reaction from something so simple. Nadia's tears weren't gentle. They carried weight, each one seeming to carve a deeper line of pain across her face. She looked at the paper again, and this time a flicker of anger crossed her expression. Not the kind that explodes outward, but the kind that burns inward and doesn't fade. She stood there for another moment, gripping the paper tightly, her knuckles whitening. Then she did something that made Keanu's chest tighten. She lifted her head and turned, looking straight into the hidden camera lens. Nadia's gaze into the camera was steady, unblinking. There was no confusion in her eyes, no tentative searching as if she suspected she might be watched. It was certainty. She knew. For a long few seconds, she didn't move, letting the silence in the room swell. Keanu's breath caught in his throat as he leaned toward the tablet, half expecting her to put the paper down and walk away. Instead, she raised her chin slightly, as though bracing herself for something difficult. "I know you're watching, Mr. Reeves," she said softly, her voice carrying a firmness that made the hair on his arms rise. It was a strange thing to hear his name spoken aloud when he wasn't in the room. On the small screen, it sounded almost like a private summons. She glanced down at the document in her hands, then back up at the lens. "We need to talk," she continued, her tone stripped of any pretense of formality. It wasn't a request. Keanu's grip on the steering wheel tightened. There was no way she should have known about the camera. He had installed it discreetly, hidden behind an old row of books with no visible lens, and yet here she was, not only aware of it, but addressing him directly through it. She stepped closer, close enough for the camera to capture every subtle shift in her expression. The tears had not dried, but her face carried the steady weight of someone who had already decided she would not let them weaken her. "I think you already know what this is," she said, lifting the paper slightly. "But if you don't, you should." The words landed heavily, even without context. They carried an edge, as though she believed he had a personal connection to whatever was written there. Keanu's mind raced. He thought back to when he'd last seen that paper, years ago when he'd placed it there almost absent-mindedly. He'd never given it much thought since, but now, seeing her hold it like it was a loaded weapon, he began to realize it might mean far more than he'd understood. And then, without another word, she carefully refolded the paper, her hands still trembling slightly. Nadia didn't put the paper back. Instead, she held it against her chest, the way someone might hold onto a lifeline they'd been searching for years to find. Her breath was still uneven, but her eyes never left the camera. "You left this here for a reason," she said quietly. "Or maybe you forgot it was here, but either way, it changes everything." Keanu's pulse quickened. There was something about the way she spoke, calm but edged with urgency, that told him this wasn't about curiosity. This was personal. Deeply personal. She glanced toward the window, scanning the street beyond, as though she knew exactly where he was. Then she looked back at the lens, her voice low but deliberate. "I'll finish my work today. I won't take anything else, but we're going to have this conversation, Mr. Reeves, whether you're ready for it or not." With that, she turned and left the office, her steps measured, almost too quiet for the camera's microphone to catch. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving the open safe in its silent corner, the black notebook untouched, and the absence of that single sheet of paper glaring like a missing puzzle piece. Keanu sat frozen in his car. His plan had been simple: leave the safe open, watch for temptation, and confirm her loyalty. Instead, he was left with a far more unsettling truth. Nadia had recognized something in his possession that stirred grief, anger, and perhaps even accusation. And she was ready to confront him about it. He glanced at the time on his dashboard. Less than an hour had passed since he'd left the house, but it felt like the day had already taken a turn into dangerous territory. His test wasn't over. It had barely begun. As the live feed continued, he saw Nadia moving through the house again, cleaning, tidying, going about her work as though nothing had happened. Yet every movement seemed deliberate, every pause intentional. She wasn't avoiding him, she was waiting. Keanu leaned back in his seat, 1,000 questions pressing against his thoughts. What was written on that paper? And why, deep down, did he have the sinking feeling that when she told him, he wouldn't like the answer? Keanu couldn't stand the waiting any longer. He switched off the tablet and stepped out of his car, the early afternoon sun casting sharp lines across the driveway. As he approached the house, each footstep felt heavier, like the weight of the conversation ahead was pressing down on him. He let himself in quietly, closing the door with the same measured care he'd used earlier that morning. "Forgot something," he muttered under his breath, rehearsing the casual excuse. But as soon as he stepped into the hallway, he realized there would be nothing casual about what came next. Nadia was already there, standing in the entrance to the living room. The sheet of paper was in her hand, folded once but no longer hidden. She didn't look angry in the way he'd expected. There was no shouting, no wild gestures. Instead, her stillness carried its own kind of force. "I thought you might come back," she said, her voice low but steady. Keanu forced a small nod, trying to maintain the appearance of calm. "I left my—" She cut him off before he could finish. "We need to talk about this." She held up the paper, her fingers gripping it so tightly the edges curled. Keanu took a careful step closer. "Where did you—" "You know where I found it," she said, her eyes locking onto his with a sharpness that left no room for evasion. She unfolded the paper slowly, turning it so he could see. It was an official-looking list, printed on heavy stock, marked with a watermark and a faint government seal in the top corner. Names were arranged in precise columns, each one followed by a small classification note. Some said relocated, others under surveillance, and a few, chillingly, read neutralized. One name was circled in dark ink: Viktor Vulov. Nadia's voice softened, but the tremor beneath it betrayed the storm she was holding back. "That's my husband. He was killed in Ukraine 3 years ago. They said it was a random street attack. But I knew it wasn't random." Keanu's chest tightened. "Nadia, I didn't know this was in there for that reason." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Then tell me, Mr. Reeves, why is my husband's name in your safe?" Keanu drew in a slow breath, steadying himself before he spoke. "Nadia, I swear to you, I didn't put that paper in there to hide something from you. It came into my possession by accident." She didn't move, her posture rigid, her eyes fixed on his face as if searching for any hint of a lie. He continued, "A little over a year ago, I acquired a small cybersecurity company in Los Angeles. They specialized in data recovery, old archives, encrypted files, that sort of thing. Most of it was routine corporate work. But when I bought them out, part of the deal was that I received all of their physical storage, including this." He gestured toward the document in her hand. Nadia's brow furrowed. "So you just keep it, without knowing what it meant?" Keanu nodded slowly. "When I first saw it, I recognized it was some kind of official list. But I didn't recognize any of the names. I told myself I'd look into it later, and I locked it away. I've been busy, and I forgot." Her fingers tightened on the page. "You forgot a list of people marked for death." Her voice rose slightly now, the calm cracking. "This isn't a grocery list, Mr. Reeves. This is a record of lives taken, my husband's life." The weight of her words hung between them. Keanu felt a pang of guilt, not for causing her husband's death, but for the negligence of letting such a document sit, unseen, while it might have held answers for someone like her. "I'm sorry, Nadia," he said quietly. "I didn't connect it to you. I didn't even know you were married before you came to America." Nadia's jaw tightened. "That's because I don't talk about it. Talking about him has always been dangerous. The people who killed him, if they knew I was here—" She broke off, glancing toward the window. Keanu took a step closer, his tone firm but calm. "Then maybe finding out why his name is on that list isn't just about closure for you. Maybe it's about making sure no one else suffers the same fate." Her eyes searched his for a long moment, the sharp edge of suspicion still there, but softened by a glimmer of reluctant trust. Nadia's lips pressed into a thin line. "You don't know what you're getting into. This isn't something you can just dig into without consequences." Keanu didn't flinch. "Then tell me what I'm up against." She looked down at the paper again, her thumb brushing over her husband's name as if it were the last physical link she had to him. Victor was a journalist, but not the kind who played safe. He went after organized crime, corrupt politicians, dirty deals between corporations and the government. When he published a story exposing a weapons smuggling route, they warned him to stop. He didn't. Keanu listened intently, noting the subtle tremor in her voice. "Home night," she continued, "he called me and said he'd gotten his hands on something big." He sounded scared, but determined. The next morning, he was gone. They said it was a mugging. I knew better. She looked him dead in the eye. "And now I find his name on a list in your safe in your house. That's not coincidence." Keanu shook his head. "I'm telling you, Nadia, I never met your husband. I had no idea this list was tied to anything like that. But now that I do, I'm not going to ignore it." Her brows drew together. "And what exactly are you planning to do?" "You're an actor, not an investigator. These people, if they're still around, don't care who you are." He held her gaze. "Maybe they should." For the first time since the confrontation began, her expression shifted, caught between disbelief and the faintest spark of hope. "You'd help me? Even knowing this could make you a target?" "I'm already involved," he said simply, nodding toward the paper. "The moment you found that document, it stopped being just yours. It became ours." She hesitated, then folded the paper neatly and slipped it into the pocket of her apron. "Then we start with this. But you have to promise me, no press, no public attention. If we're going to find out who put Victor on that list, we do it quietly." Keanu gave a single, steady nod. Quiet doesn't mean powerless. Something in her eyes softened, the first sign of trust breaking through the wall of suspicion. And though neither of them said it aloud, they both understood. This was no longer about a test. It was about survival. Years before the quiet streets of Los Angeles and the polished hardwood floors of Keanu's home, Nadia's life had been filled with the noise and grit of Odessa, the smell of salt water from the port, mixed with the scent of diesel and old concrete. It was here that she and Victor built their modest life, both of them believing in the power of truth, though it was Victor who bore the dangerous burden of seeking it out. Victor was not a man who feared authority. He had a reporter's eye and a soldier's resolve, the kind of person who believed that light could burn away corruption if it was bright enough. One winter afternoon, while working late at the small independent newsroom, he opened a hard drive sent anonymously. Inside were folders marked with cryptic codes, spreadsheets of offshore accounts, and scans of government contracts tied to shell companies. The deeper he dug, the more he realized he was staring at a web that connected politicians, businessmen, and criminal networks. Nadia remembered the moment he came home with that look, the one that meant he'd found something dangerous. He kissed her on the forehead, but didn't sit down. "This is it," he whispered. "This is the story that changes everything." At first, she thought he meant it would change journalism, expose the corrupt, and force reform. But within days, she understood he meant something else. It would change their lives, and not in the way she hoped. The phone calls began. At first, just heavy breathing before a hang-up, then muffled voices warning him to drop the story. One evening, as they returned home from the market, they found their front door ajar. Inside, nothing was stolen, but Victor's desk drawers had been ransacked, his files scattered across the floor. On their kitchen table was a single bullet. Nadia begged him to walk away. "It's not worth your life," she pleaded. But Victor only held her hands and said, "If I stop now, they win, and they will do worse to others." The night before he planned to send the documents to an international news outlet, he told her he might need to disappear for a while after it went public. She thought he was exaggerating. She would soon learn he wasn't. The following morning, the sky over Odessa was pale and heavy with mist, the kind that clung to every surface. Victor left for what Nadia thought was just another meeting with his editor. He never came home. By nightfall, she was pacing the small kitchen, calling his phone again and again, only to hear the cold, mechanical voice telling her the number was unreachable. At midnight, there was a knock on the door. 2 uniformed officers stood there, their expressions carefully neutral. They told her that Victor had been found in the river, his death ruled an accident. They claimed he had slipped while walking along the embankment. Nadia knew immediately it was a lie. Victor was a strong swimmer, cautious near the water, and had no reason to be anywhere near the riverbank. The officers avoided her eyes when she pressed them for details. One of them simply muttered, "It's better not to ask too many questions," before they left. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of grief and fear. At the funeral, a thin man in a dark coat approached her while the mourners gathered around Victor's grave. His face was sharp, his eyes hidden beneath the brim of his hat. He spoke quietly, without introducing himself. "You need to leave Odessa, soon. For your safety and for your daughter's." She froze, her fingers tightening on the bouquet she held. "Who are you?" she asked. But he was already walking away, disappearing into the crowd before she could follow. That night, she noticed a black sedan parked across the street from her apartment building. The same car appeared the next day and the next. Sometimes it idled with its engine running. Sometimes it was just there, silent and watching. One evening, her daughter found a small envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a photograph of Nadia and her little girl walking to the market, taken from a distance. On the back, in neat handwriting, were the words, "Leave, or next time we take more than pictures." There was no more doubt. The documents Victor had tried to release had put a target on all of them. And if she stayed, she wouldn't be burying just a husband. 2 weeks after Victor's funeral, Nadia sold what little they owned that could fit into a suitcase. She avoided telling even her closest friends the truth about where she was going. Every conversation felt like it could be overheard. Every knock at the door felt like a trap. Her daughter, barely 10 at the time, didn't understand why they were leaving in the middle of the night. Nadia knelt down in the hallway, zipping up her coat, and told her it was a long holiday to America. It was the only way to keep her calm, to keep her from asking about the shadows that seemed to follow them everywhere. The escape itself felt like something out of one of Victor's investigative stories. They boarded a night train to Lviv under false names, Nadia clutching a forged passport and the last photograph they had taken as a family. She barely slept during the journey, jolting awake at every sound in the corridor, half expecting armed men to burst into the compartment. From Lviv, they crossed into Poland, where a friend of Victor's had arranged temporary shelter. For 3 weeks, they lived in a cramped apartment with 2 other refugees, the air heavy with the smell of boiled cabbage and fear. Then, finally, their U.S. visas were approved through an emergency humanitarian program. Landing in New York was like stepping onto another planet. The noise, the lights, the sheer scale of everything, it was overwhelming. But beneath the awe was a hollow ache. Victor wasn't there to see their daughter's wide-eyed wonder. He wasn't there to share the relief of safety. Nadia worked any job she could find, cleaning offices at night, serving tables during the day, and eventually becoming a housekeeper. She carried her grief like a hidden scar, never speaking of the threats, the car that followed her, or the paper trail that had destroyed her family. To the people who hired her, she was just another immigrant working hard to make ends meet. When she was offered a position at Keanu Reeves's home 3 years ago, she took it as a sign that maybe, just maybe, life could be quiet again. She never imagined that one morning in his office, she would see her past staring back at her from the depths of his safe. Keanu didn't let Nadia's question hang in the air. He motioned for her to sit down at the small table in the corner of his office, the paper still clutched tightly in her hand. His voice was calm, but there was weight behind it. "I need you to understand something before you make any assumptions," he began. "That list isn't just some old piece of paper I keep in a safe. It's evidence. And it's not the only thing I've found." Nadia's brows knit together, suspicion still shadowing her face. She didn't speak, so Keanu went on. "A few years ago, I bought out a small cybersecurity firm. At first, I thought it was just an investment, something to help protect my own projects. But once I got access to their archives, I found entire folders filled with names, locations, and classified notes. People from all over the world. Journalists, activists, whistleblowers. Some of them dead." Her grip on the paper tightened. "I didn't know what I was looking at back then," Keanu continued, "but I knew it wasn't something I could ignore. I reached out to contacts I trusted, people in the FBI who deal with counterintelligence. That's when I learned about networks that make money by selling information about people who stand up against corruption. They sell it to the very organizations those people are fighting against." Nadia's stomach churned. "And Victor's name was on that list?" Keanu nodded slowly. "Yes. Along with notes and a timestamp from before his death. That's what makes this so disturbing. It means someone was watching him long before whatever documents he found in Ukraine." She stared at him, her breathing shallow. "You're saying his death wasn't because he exposed those files? It was because they had already marked him?" "I'm saying there's a strong possibility he was targeted months in advance," Keanu replied. "And I have more than this one page." He stood, walked to the safe, and began pulling out a folder so thick it strained against the clip holding it together. When he set it down between them, Nadia could see her husband's face staring back at her from a grainy surveillance photo. The date in the corner made her blood run cold. It was taken 6 months before his so-called accident. Nadia's hands hovered above the folder, as if touching it might make the truth more real than she was ready for. Keanu didn't rush her. He simply opened the first few pages, letting the photographs speak for themselves. There was Victor outside a government building, briefcase in hand. Another captured him in a cafe, his head bent close to a younger man she didn't recognize. In each image, there was a common thread. A figure in the background, never the same face twice, but always watching. "These are from a hard drive we recovered during a raid on a private security contractor," Keanu explained. "The FBI believes they were subcontracted to track certain individuals on the list." Nadia swallowed hard, flipping to another photo. This one froze her. It was Victor walking their daughter to school, sunlight slanting across the cobblestones. The date was from the spring before his death. "They knew where we lived," she whispered. Keanu's jaw tightened. "Yes, and they didn't just know where you lived. They knew your routines, your shopping trips, your work schedule, everything. It's all documented here." She turned to a printed email chain, lines of text translated from Ukrainian. One message, written in cold, bureaucratic language, described Victor as a priority for neutralization, due to his potential to destabilize ongoing partnerships. Another referenced collateral management, a phrase that made Nadia's skin crawl. She slammed the folder shut, her voice trembling. "Why are you showing me this now? If you've known for so long—" "I didn't have confirmation until recently," Keanu interrupted gently. "Until your reaction today, I didn't know if bringing this to you would help you or put you in more danger." Her eyes searched his, looking for even the smallest trace of deceit. But all she found was a steady, unflinching sincerity. "The people who did this," Keanu said quietly, "they're still out there, and the FBI thinks this network might still be active. That's why I keep these files, not because I want them, but because they might be the key to stopping more names from ending up like Victor's." Nadia looked back at the safe, at the thick folder that had just cracked open the past she thought she had buried. The air between them felt charged, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Keanu leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "Nadia, I'm not just keeping this for history's sake. I've been gathering pieces for months, working with agents who are off the official record. This isn't a simple case file, it's a map. And I think we can follow it to whoever ordered Victor's death." Her breath caught. "You're talking about going after them?" "I'm talking about finding the truth," he said firmly. "And the truth is buried under layers of false trails and paid silence. If we can connect the names, the dates, and the companies involved, we can give the FBI enough to dismantle the network." Nadia looked at the folder, her hands curling into fists. "They ruined my life. They made my daughter grow up without her father. If you think I'm going to just stand back—" "I'm not asking you to stand back," Keanu interrupted. "But I need you to be careful. These people don't just erase names on paper. They erase people. If we move too fast or make the wrong call, you could be their next target." Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Nadia's gaze fell to one of the photographs still lying on the table. Victor, smiling, unaware of the shadow in the background. She reached out and slid it toward her fingertips trembling. "I want to help," she said finally. "I want them to know I'm not afraid of them anymore." Keanu's eyes softened, but his tone stayed measured. "Then we start slow. You'll tell me everything you remember about the months before Victor's death. Every face, every odd encounter, every conversation you thought was nothing at the time. Details matter, even the ones that seem meaningless." She nodded, the fire in her expression slowly overtaking the shock. "And when we find them?" Keanu glanced toward the safe, then back to her. "When we find them, we make sure they can't hurt anyone else again." The decision hung between them, unspoken but binding. For Nadia, it was the first time in years she felt something other than grief and fear. For Keanu, it was the moment he knew this investigation had just become personal in a way he hadn't anticipated. Keanu hesitated before opening the last folder on the table. This one was slimmer, its cover marked only by a faded government seal. He slid it toward Nadia without a word. She eyed it warily, then slowly opened the flap. Inside was a single adoption record, printed in both Ukrainian and English. Her gaze locked on a name she had never seen before. Dmitry Vulov. Her brow furrowed. "Vulov, this is Victor's last name?" Keanu nodded. "It's his brother's son, your nephew by marriage." Nadia's lips parted in disbelief. "Victor's brother? Had a child? But I never met him. Victor never mentioned him." "That's because his brother died years earlier," Keanu explained gently. "From what the records show, it was under mysterious circumstances. The boy was a toddler when it happened. He went into state care, and after Victor's death, he was listed as having no immediate family willing or able to take him in." Nadia's hands shook as she lifted the paper closer to her face, reading every line as if it might vanish. "Orphaned twice," she whispered. "And I never even knew he existed." Keanu leaned forward, his voice low but steady. "The file says he was adopted by an American family in California, the Millers. Stable home, no criminal record, good people." Her eyes shimmered, torn between astonishment and sorrow. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you deserve to know," Keanu said. "And because I think this is connected." Victor's name wasn't the only one marked in those files. There's a pattern. People disappear, and sometimes their children disappear with them, folded into new lives, sometimes for safety, sometimes to erase a bloodline. Nadia clutched the folder to her chest, her thoughts spiraling. You think they hid him? To protect him? Maybe, Keanu replied. Or maybe they didn't want him to grow up asking questions about what happened to his father and uncle. Either way, he's out there, alive, living a life you were never told about. Nadia looked up, her voice trembling but determined. Then I have to see him. I have to know if he even knows who he is. Keanu didn't answer immediately. He could see the urgency in Nadia's face, but he also knew the kind of danger that still lurked around this story. Nadia, he began carefully, if you reach out to him without caution, you could be putting him in the same danger Victor faced. There are still people watching these connections. The wrong move could expose him. Her jaw tightened. So I'm supposed to do nothing? Pretend I didn't just find out I have a living nephew? No, Keanu said firmly. But we have to be smart about it. The family he's with has no idea about the deeper history. As far as they know, they adopted an ordinary boy from overseas. They don't know about the corruption or the hit lists or Victor's death. Nadia's eyes darkened. Then they don't know the truth about why he was really left alone? Keanu leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. This is why I'm telling you now, because the FBI is already aware of Dimitri. They've been monitoring his safety in the background, quietly, without interfering in his life. They believe someone was looking for him a few years ago, but the trail went cold. Nadia's breath caught. Someone? Looking for him? Who? We don't know, Keanu admitted. Could have been someone trying to protect him. Could have been the same people who targeted Victor. Her hand tightened around the folder until the edges bent. So what are you saying? That I have to just watch from a distance while my only link to Victor grows up without knowing me? I'm saying we gather more information first, Keanu said. We can find a way for you to meet him without revealing too much, until we know he's safe. I have contacts who can arrange it quietly. Nadia's eyes filled again, but this time there was fire behind them. I will meet him, Keanu, no matter how long it takes, no matter how careful we have to be. He's family. And I've already lost too much. Keanu gave a slow nod, knowing there would be no changing her mind. Then we'll do it right. Together. The afternoon light shifted across the room, casting long shadows that made the moment feel heavier. Nadia set the folder back on the table, her fingers lingering on the edges, as if it were the only solid thing keeping her anchored. What's he like? She asked finally, her voice quieter now. This. Dimitri, do you know? Keanu hesitated, then reached into another envelope. He slid out a photograph and turned it toward her. In it, a boy of about 12 grinned at the camera, hair slightly unkempt, eyes a piercing gray that seemed to carry the same mix of warmth and defiance she remembered in Victor. Nadia's breath caught. He looks just like him. Keanu smiled faintly. He's doing well, plays soccer, good grades. The family loves him. They've given him stability, which is the best shield we have for now. Her eyes stayed fixed on the photo. I wish I could have been there. I wish I could have kept him safe myself. I know, Keanu said gently, but the fact that he's safe now is because you weren't there. If you had stayed in Ukraine, if you had taken him, it might have ended differently. Nadia closed her eyes for a moment, taking in the weight of that truth. Still, he should know who his uncle was. He should know the truth one day. And he will, Keanu promised, when the time is right. Not as a shock, not in the middle of danger, but as a story he can carry with pride. She nodded slowly, as if forcing herself to accept that timing was as much a part of protection as physical safety. Keanu leaned back, studying her expression. Nadia, there's something else. I've been tracing where these lists came from. Victor's name wasn't the only one marked. There are others. people connected to different families across borders. This might go deeper than either of us imagined. Nadia's grip on the photo tightened. Then we find out everything. Not just for Dimitri, but for all of them. Keanu met her eyes, the unspoken agreement settling between them. Whatever path lay ahead, it wouldn't be easy, but neither of them was turning back. The knock on the door was sharp and urgent, breaking the tense quiet of the room. Keanu and Nadia exchanged a look before he rose and crossed the floor. He opened the door to find two FBI agents standing there, both dressed in plain clothes but carrying the unmistakable weight of authority in their expressions. "Mr. Reeves," the taller one said, flashing his badge, "we need to come in, now." Keanu stepped aside without hesitation, motioning for Nadia to stay calm. The agents entered quickly, scanning the room as though expecting someone else to be there. "What's going on?" Keanu asked. The shorter agent's voice was low and urgent. "Your investigation has been compromised. Someone leaked the identity of your housekeeper." His eyes shifted to Nadia. "Ma'am, I need you to understand. This means you're in immediate danger." Nadia's face paled. "My identity? To who?" "That's what we're working on," the taller agent replied. "But whoever it is, they're moving fast. We believe the leak happened less than an hour ago." Keanu's jaw tightened. "And how do you know?" The agent pulled out a phone, swiping to a secure message. "Intercepted chatter. They know your name, your connection to Viktor Vulov, and that you've been speaking to us." Nadia's hands gripped the edge of the table. "My daughter, Anna, she's at a friend's house. I need to call her." She fumbled for her phone and dialed, pressing it to her ear. The ringtone droned on, no answer. She hung up and tried again. Still nothing. Her breathing quickened. She always picks up. Always. Keanu's instincts kicked in. "Where is this friend's house?" Before she could answer, Nadia's phone vibrated in her hand. She looked down, and the color drained from her face. It wasn't Anna. It was a text from an unknown number. Attached was a photo. Anna sat on a bench, flanked by two men in dark jackets. One had his arm draped casually behind her, but his posture was rigid, predatory. The message below was chilling in its simplicity. "We should talk." Nadia's knees buckled slightly, and Keanu stepped forward, steadying her. The agents leaned in, their expressions hardening. The calm morning was gone. The fight had just begun. The taller agent immediately snapped into action, pulling out his phone and forwarding the image to a secure team channel. "We need a trace on this number and location, now," he barked into his earpiece. The shorter agent turned to Nadia. "Do you know the men in this photo?" Nadia shook her head, but her eyes never left the screen. "No, but look at Anna's face. She's trying not to look scared, but I can see it. She's holding her breath. That's what she does when she's nervous." Keanu leaned closer, studying the image. Behind the bench was a blurry street sign, partly obstructed by a tree branch. The lettering was faded, but the shape was familiar. Rectangular with a thin red border. "That's not from around here," Keanu murmured. "I've seen those signs in Eastwood District." The taller agent looked up. "That narrows it. Eastwood has public surveillance on every main street. If they're careless, we can spot them on a traffic cam." Nadia's voice cracked. "You have to find her before they move her. Please." Keanu put a hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. "We will." The shorter agent pulled out a tablet and began tapping quickly, bringing up a split-screen feed of multiple street cameras. One by one, grainy images flickered past. Keanu's eyes scanned each frame with intensity, his mind locking onto every detail. Then he saw it. A glimpse of Anna, sitting on that same bench, one of the men leaning in to speak to her. The timestamp was just 3 minutes old. "That's Riverside Park," Keanu said without hesitation. "I run past there sometimes. The bench is near the east entrance, close to the coffee stand." The agents exchanged a glance. "We're moving," the taller one said. Nadia's breathing was uneven, but there was steel in her eyes now. "I'm coming." The shorter agent shook his head. Too dangerous. We need you safe." Keanu stepped in. "She stays close to me. No one will touch her." The taller agent gave a reluctant nod. "Fine, but you follow every instruction, no exceptions." Outside, the air felt heavier, charged with urgency. The team piled into two unmarked SUVs, engines rumbling. Somewhere in the city, Anna was waiting. And the clock was ticking. The SUVs sped through the late afternoon traffic, weaving between lanes as the agents radioed updates to units already converging on Jefferson Park. Keanu sat in the back beside Nadia, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "You think they'll hurt her?" Nadia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Keanu met her gaze. "Not if we get there first." The taller agent in the front passenger seat spoke over his shoulder. "From the text, this looks like leverage. They want something, and they want it fast. We can use that against them." Nadia shook her head. "They don't need money. Whoever has Anna, they want to shut me up." The words hung in the air, chilling everyone in the vehicle. Keanu's jaw tightened. Then they picked the wrong person to threaten. 2 minutes later, the SUVs rolled to a stop a block away from the park. The agents fanned out, blending into the scattered crowd. Keanu and Nadia stayed just behind, eyes scanning every face. There, near the east entrance, Anna sat rigid on the bench, a paper cup in her hands. The two men from the photo stood on either side of her, both with casual stances that felt too deliberate. Keanu felt the pulse in his neck quicken. One of the agents moved in from the left, another from the right. The taller agent spoke softly into his mic. "Wait for my signal. Now." The move was swift, one agent securing the man on Anna's right, the other grabbing the one on her left. Anna let out a startled cry, then realized who had arrived. "Mom," she gasped as Nadia rushed forward, pulling her into a fierce embrace. Keanu stepped in front of them, scanning the scene. The two men were already being restrained, their phones confiscated. An agent checked one of the devices and nodded grimly. They were waiting for instructions. The next message might have told them to move her. Anna clung to her mother, tears welling. "I'm okay, Mama. They didn't hurt me, but they said they know everything about you." Keanu looked at Nadia, then back at the agents. "Then we need to find out exactly who they are, and why this goes deeper than any of us thought." The relief of having Anna back didn't last. Barely 20 minutes after returning to Keanu's home, Nadia's phone lit up with a new text. The message was short, cold, and final. "Gallmauer, Riverside Park. You and the actor. Alone, or the girl disappears forever." Nadia's hands shook so violently she almost dropped the phone. They still have her?" she whispered. Anna's voice trembled. "Mama, I'm here. I'm safe." But Keanu's eyes narrowed as he studied the message. "This isn't about you being here now. They want to prove they can reach you again anytime they want." An FBI agent stepped closer, reading over Nadia's shoulder. "It's a trap. They're trying to isolate you. If you go without backup, you're handing yourselves over to them." Nadia's breathing quickened. "Then let them take me. If that's what it takes to end this, I'll do it." Keanu stepped between her and the door. "No, that's exactly what they're counting on. And they're not just after you. This is connected to Victor, to the files, to whatever network has been selling out whistleblowers. If you disappear, it's over. Not just for you, but for the people we can still save." She met his gaze, desperate but defiant. "I can't just sit here. If they want me, fine, but I won't hide." Keanu placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We're not hiding, we're planning." He crossed the room to a side table where his phone and a slim silver laptop rested. Opening the device, he began typing quickly, screens filling with lines of code and encrypted maps. "What are you doing?" Nadia asked, still pacing. "Something the FBI can't do fast enough," Keanu replied. I've got friends in the cybersecurity world who owe me favors. We can piggyback onto the cell towers near Riverside Park, trace every incoming signal in real time. If they contact their handler, we'll know exactly where it's coming from." The FBI agent frowned. "That's risky. If they realize they're being tracked, then they'll know they picked the wrong people to threaten," Keanu said firmly. Nadia stopped pacing, looking at him with a mix of fear and hope. "So we go? But on our terms?" Keanu nodded once. "Exactly. We'll walk in, just like they want. But this time, we'll be the ones watching them." The clock was already ticking. 51 minutes left. Keanu's fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling in satellite imagery, public surveillance feeds, and encrypted access to park security cameras. Lines of data streamed across the screen like a living pulse. "I've got 3 active devices pinging in Riverside Park right now," he said, eyes never leaving the screen. 2 are burners. 1 is transmitting on a rotating frequency, professional grade. That's them. Nadia hovered close, her voice low. "And you can follow them?" "In real time," Keanu replied. "But we'll need to be careful. If they realize they're boxed in too early, they might panic." The FBI agents exchanged uneasy glances. One of them leaned forward. "Look, Reeves, we understand your resources, but we're telling you, you walk in there, you give them leverage. They might not even have Anna anymore. This could just be about tying up loose ends." Nadia's jaw tightened. "Then we untie them, every last one." Keanu turned to her. "We'll have eyes on every exit. I'll carry a mic in my collar so my team can hear everything. You just stay close to me, no matter what happens." The agents reluctantly agreed to shadow them from a distance, hidden in plain clothes around the park perimeter. The plan was set: visible compliance, invisible control. Keanu took a deep breath and closed the laptop. "All right, we leave in 10. While Nadia went to change into a plain jacket and scarf, Keanu made one last call. "It's me. I need 3 of your best on standby. Riverside Park, 40 minutes. Silent perimeter. No contact unless I signal." A deep voice on the other end simply replied, "Understood." When Nadia returned, she was holding a small locket. "Anna gave me this when she was little," she said softly. "If things go wrong, I want you to give it back to her." Keanu shook his head. "We're bringing her back ourselves. Keep it. It'll remind you why we're going to win." They stepped out into the late afternoon sun, the world around them unaware of the stakes. Keanu's car waited in the driveway, engine running, trunk already holding a black duffel with equipment that could tip the balance if the meeting went bad. With every passing minute, the air seemed to thicken. The park wasn't far, but every street, every red light, felt like a countdown neither of them could control. They reached Riverside Park with 17 minutes to spare. The place looked deceptively peaceful. Joggers passing on the trail, children playing near the fountain, couples walking hand in hand. But, to Keanu, every shadow seemed to carry weight, every face a potential threat. His phone buzzed once, a secure signal from his tech team. 2 targets on the east side bench, 3rd moving near the carousel, the message read. Nadia scanned the open expanse, her eyes locking on a small cluster of pigeons scattering into the air. 3 men had just risen from the bench, their attention fixed on her. One of them was holding a phone. Keanu's earpiece crackled. "That's them. No sudden moves." They approached slowly, keeping the agreed distance. The man with the phone raised it like an offering and pressed play. A muffled video appeared on the screen. Anna, tied to a chair but unharmed, looking scared yet defiant. A voice from behind the camera said, "Follow instructions and she goes home. Try anything else, and she doesn't." Nadia's lips parted to speak, but Keanu subtly touched her arm. She stayed silent. "What do you want?" Keanu asked evenly. The man smiled thinly. "It's not about money. It's about silence. That list in your safe? It never existed. The woman beside you? She goes back to Ukraine and stays quiet. And the files, all of them, are destroyed. Keanu tilted his head slightly. And if we don't? The man's smile didn't change. Then we send a different kind of video, one you'll never stop replaying in your head. Keanu glanced briefly toward a street lamp camera across the way. It blinked twice, his silent signal that his team had full visual coverage and tracking. "All right," Keanu said, voice steady. "Show us she's alive in real time. Then we talk." The man hesitated, then tapped his phone. A live feed appeared, Anna in what looked like a storage room. She was breathing heavily but unhurt. Keanu gave a slow nod. Inside, his mind was already mapping every step, every angle, every second they had before the kidnappers realized they were walking into a trap of his own making. Keanu stepped back from the kidnappers, pretending to check his phone for a banking transfer. In reality, his thumb activated a secure command string. Within seconds, traffic camera feeds from the surrounding blocks began streaming into his device. One by one, the park entrances lit up with images of passing cars, pedestrians, and vehicles that had lingered too long. The first anomaly appeared near the north entrance. A black SUV parked at an odd angle, engine idling, windows tinted beyond regulation. A man in a dark jacket leaned casually against it, but his eyes never strayed far from the central fountain, where Keanu and Nadia stood. Keanu swiped to another feed, this time from a city bus dash camera. It captured the reflection of a second vehicle, a dark sedan crawling along the park perimeter, its license plate partially obscured with mud. Inside, two men sat rigidly, scanning the open grounds. From the opposite side of the park, a third feed came through from a Tesla autopilot network. The car's sensors had flagged a stationary object in a no-parking zone. Keanu zoomed in. A matte black tactical truck, larger than any delivery vehicle. Its back doors reinforced with steel plating. No logos, no license markings, just a silent, hulking presence behind a row of trees. Keanu's gut tightened. This wasn't a quick snatch and grab, this was a coordinated extraction, and they were ready to move in hard if anything went wrong. He keyed into his encrypted earbud. 3 primary vehicles, 1 SUV, 1 sedan, and a tactical truck by the west trees. Each has eyes on us. A calm voice from his tech team replied, "Confirmed. Satellite thermal shows 6 heat signatures in the truck, armed. The SUV has 2, sedan has 3, all in formation for an intercept." Nadia's face drained of color when she overheard. "That truck," she whispered. "That's not for intimidation. That's for taking people who never come back." Keanu didn't argue. He kept scanning, noting the staggered positioning of the operatives. They had cut off every exit path except the eastern jogging trail, the only route not yet compromised. It was narrow, tree-covered, and open to a service road leading to the waterfront. But if they moved too soon, the captors might panic and harm Anna before they could intervene. He studied the tactical truck again. Its placement wasn't random. It sat within sprinting distance of the carousel area, where the kidnappers had likely planned to move them. The proximity to a concealed service lane meant they could vanish in less than 90 seconds once inside. This meant only one thing. If he wanted to save Anna and walk out alive, he had to turn their trap into his. Keanu lowered his phone slightly, giving the illusion he was still negotiating with the kidnappers by text. In reality, he was mapping every movement in the park. The men by the SUV swapped positions, one disappearing briefly into the shadows before reappearing with what looked like a compact radio. The sedan had stopped completely now, its driver pretending to study a paper map, an outdated prop to avoid suspicion while watching every step Keanu and Nadia took. He knew this was a choke point operation. The tactical truck wasn't just for muscle, it was their insurance. If anything went sideways, Anna would be thrown inside, and the vehicle would be gone before local police could even respond. Keanu tapped the side of his phone twice, a silent cue to his tech team to ping all nearby Teslas with active autopilot. The electric cars began recording 360-degree feeds, feeding them back into his encrypted hub. Eyes in every lane, his team confirmed. Nadia's voice trembled as she tried to stay calm. What if they see you looking at this? What if they... They won't, Keanu said firmly. Right now, they think they're the ones controlling the stage. We're just actors reading their script, but I'm already rewriting it. His gaze swept to the eastern jogging trail again. The live feed showed a single cyclist moving through, alone, fast, and headed toward the service road. Keanu recognized the timing. That cyclist was one of his quiet assets, positioned hours earlier in case of an escalation. If the plan worked, that path would be their escape route. From the satellite thermal overlay, he could now see the tactical truck's rear doors were ajar, the faint outline of someone crouched just inside. Another operative was pacing in short bursts along the tree line. They were getting restless. This meant the meeting window was closing. Keanu sent a quick data burst to a small drone parked on a rooftop 2 blocks away. The feed came online instantly, giving him a high, silent view of the park. From above, the coordinated pattern of the kidnappers was obvious. They were boxing him and Nadia in like a tightening net. Nadia glanced at him, eyes searching for a sign this wasn't as bad as it looked. But the look she got back told her everything. The only way out was to act before the net closed completely. The drone's camera panned slowly toward the fountain where they stood. A reflection in the water caught Keanu's attention. A flicker of movement on the roof of a nearby cafe. Another spotter. Possibly a sniper. His tech team confirmed with a whisper in his ear. Heat signature on the cafe roof. One individual, armed, likely overwatch for the extraction. Keanu exhaled, slowly. The park wasn't just a meeting point, it was a battlefield already set. Keanu's mind ran through scenarios at lightning speed. The presence of an overwatch changed everything. A sniper meant there was no tolerance for improvisation. One wrong move, and the operation would spiral out of control. He tilted his head slightly, signaling to Nadia to move closer as if seeking comfort. In reality, he was shielding her from a potential firing line. Listen to me carefully, he murmured. We have less than 10 minutes before they force a move. We can't wait for them to act first. Nadia swallowed hard. What do you need me to do? Stay in their sight, but keep your hands free. I'll give you a signal when it's time. On his screen, Keanu marked each hostile position with a red dot. The SUV team, the sedan team, the tactical truck crew, and now the sniper. His tech team overlaid escape vectors in blue, mapping where each path would be most vulnerable for a short window of time. The cyclist asset had already looped around the far side of the park, waiting for the moment to intersect their path. Keanu sent him a quick encrypted command. Be ready to block the tactical truck. From above, the drone caught something else. A second black vehicle approaching slowly from the west. It wasn't in the original formation. Keanu's gut told him it was a backup unit, either to replace the tactical truck or intercept at another exit. He adjusted his plan on the fly. The drone would drop a distraction device, nothing lethal, just enough noise to fracture the kidnappers' communication for a few seconds. It would be all the time they'd get. The FBI feed in his earpiece crackled. Reeves, we're 15 minutes out. If you can stall, 15 minutes is 10 too late. Keanu cut in quietly. They'll move before that. Nadia's phone buzzed again. Another message. This time a short video clip of Anna, seated in the back of a van, blindfolded, but unharmed. A voice off camera said, "One wrong step and the deal's over." Keanu studied the clip frame by frame. The van's interior showed a distinct tear in the upholstery, and sunlight fell across Anna's knees at an angle. It was enough for him to know the van was parked on the east side of the park, near the maintenance sheds. The tactical truck was a decoy for intimidation. The real holding point was less than 60 meters away. He leaned toward Nadia, voice low. "We're not meeting them at the fountain. We're taking her before they expect it." Her eyes widened, but before she could respond, Keanu lifted his chin toward the eastern trail. The cyclist began moving. The drone adjusted its angle. Everything was set. The kidnappers thought they'd built the perfect trap. Keanu was about to turn it inside out. The knock at the door was sharp and impatient, the kind that carried no courtesy. Keanu glanced at the monitor by the entrance, already knowing what he would see. A man stood there in a dark jacket, eyes darting toward the driveway and the street beyond. His left hand stayed buried in his pocket, the unmistakable bulge of a weapon outlined against the fabric. Nadia stiffened. "That's one of them," she whispered, voice tight. Keanu motioned for her to move toward the back hallway, where the FBI agents had positioned themselves earlier. He opened the door halfway, keeping his body angled, making it appear casual. "You're early," he said evenly. The man's expression didn't change. "We move when we want. You're coming with me, now." His tone was low, but the threat in it was sharp enough to cut glass. Keanu didn't respond. His gaze flicked over the man's shoulder. Two unmarked sedans were idling farther down the street, engines running. The kidnappers weren't here to negotiate. They were here to extract him or Nadia by force. The man stepped forward, but before he could cross the threshold, the quiet air split with the sharp, commanding voice of an FBI agent. "Federal agents, step away from the door." The kidnapper spun toward the sound, reaching for his weapon, but the agent was already moving. The front yard exploded into motion. Another agent emerged from behind a parked SUV, weapon drawn. The man froze, torn between running and drawing. His hesitation was fatal. The first agent surged forward, tackling him hard into the porch railing. The weapon clattered to the wooden boards. From down the street, one of the sedans roared to life and sped away. The second followed, tires screeching. Over the shouts of the agents, Keanu heard the faint echo of a van's engine in the distance. Moving fast. Moving away. A store. "They still have her," Nadia breathed, hands gripping the frame of the door so tightly her knuckles went white. The arrested kidnapper was hauled upright, wrists cuffed behind his back, his face twisted in pain and rage. One of the agents tried to press him for Anna's location, but the man only spat on the ground and laughed. Keanu didn't wait for the exchange to go on. He turned to the lead agent. "The park," he said. "That's where they're going. They'll try to use the crowd as cover before moving her." The agent hesitated. "We can't confirm that without..." "We don't have time to confirm," Keanu cut in. "They're losing us more ground every second." Nadia stepped forward. "Then I'm going with him. Every moment we wait, she's further away." The agent's jaw tightened, but after a brief pause, he nodded. "We'll have units converge there, but you move carefully. They'll know you're coming." Keanu and Nadia didn't waste another word. They were already moving toward the car, the sound of distant sirens chasing them into the street. Keanu's SUV surged forward as soon as they hit the main road, the growl of the engine a low, determined hum beneath their tense silence. Nadia sat rigid in the passenger seat, eyes fixed on the blurred city lights rushing past, her fingers twisting the edge of her sleeve. "They'll hurt her if we're late," she said, barely above a whisper. Keanu kept his focus on the road. "That's why we won't be." His voice carried no hesitation, no room for doubt. The GPS feed from the FBI link was already updating in real time. A blinking dot marked the location of one of the suspect vehicles heading toward Riverside Park, but as they followed the feed, Keanu noticed the dot splitting into two paths. One continued toward the park, the other veered toward a quieter industrial strip near the river. Grant said, "That's the way out. The wind..." "They're trying to split our attention," Keanu muttered. "One path's a decoy." "Which one has her?" Nadia demanded, turning toward him sharply. "We follow the one with the heavier escort," he said. "If they're guarding it, she's inside." The SUV weaved between lanes, closing the distance. Keanu's phone buzzed. The lead FBI agent's voice came through, urgent. We've got a tactical unit 5 minutes out from the park, but the secondary vehicle is on a different vector. If you engage, you'll be alone until backup arrives. Keanu's answer was immediate. Send your team to the park. Nadia and I will intercept the other. The agent began to argue, but Keanu ended the call before the protests could start. Time mattered more than consensus. The road narrowed into a dimly lit stretch running alongside the river. Warehouses loomed on either side, their windows dark and silent. Ahead, the taillights of the black van bobbed over the uneven asphalt. "They're slowing down," Nadia said, leaning forward. Keanu eased off the accelerator, keeping distance. His mind mapped the likely moves. They might be preparing to transfer Anna to another vehicle, or shift her to a location where she couldn't be tracked. Then, without warning, the van's side door slid open. A man leaned out, raising what looked like an assault rifle. "Get down," Keanu barked. Bullets rattled against the SUV's reinforced glass. Keanu swerved hard, the tires skidding on loose gravel before gripping again. Nadia ducked low, covering her head. The gunfire cut off abruptly, replaced by the van's engine revving as it surged ahead. Keanu steadied the wheel, eyes narrowing. They're desperate. That means they know we're close. In the distance, a faint flicker of movement caught his eye, a figure in the back of the van, small and hunched, a flash of dark hair barely visible between the silhouettes of the armed men. Nadia saw it too, her breath catching. "It's her," she whispered. "It's Anna." Keanu's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "We're ending this now." The van veered left toward a warehouse loading bay, its brake lights flashing as it slowed. Keanu cut the SUV's headlights and coasted forward in near darkness, letting the van think it had shaken him. Nadia glanced at him, tension etched in every line of her face. "What's the plan?" "They'll feel safer once they're off the main road," he replied. "That's when they'll make mistakes." They rolled to a silent stop just short of the warehouse entrance. Through the cracked door of the loading bay, Keanu could see shadowy figures moving inside, their voices muffled but urgent. The van backed into the bay and the door began to lower. Keanu acted fast. He hit the gas, closing the distance before the door could shut, and wedged the SUV's bumper beneath it. Metal screeched against metal. The kidnappers shouted in surprise. One man swung his weapon toward the SUV, but Keanu was already out of the driver's seat. He moved fast, his boots pounding across the concrete, closing in before the gunman could take aim. A sharp elbow to the man's wrist sent the rifle clattering away, followed by a quick blow that dropped him to the ground. Nadia scrambled out, darting toward the van. The back doors were still closed, padlocked from the outside. She pulled at the lock in desperation, but it held firm. A second kidnapper charged at her from the side. Before he could reach her, Keanu intercepted, catching the man by the collar and slamming him against the wall. The impact knocked the breath out of him, and Keanu pressed in close. "Where is she?" he demanded. The man's eyes flicked toward the van, confirming what they already knew. Keanu shoved him aside and turned back to Nadia. "Step back." From his jacket pocket, Keanu pulled a small pry bar, one he'd grabbed from the SUV's emergency kit. With a swift motion, he wedged it into the padlock, forcing it open with a sharp snap. The doors swung wide, revealing Anna huddled inside, wrists bound, eyes wide with fear. "Mom!" she cried, her voice breaking. Nadia climbed in and wrapped her arms around her daughter, holding her as if she might vanish if she let go. Tears streamed down both their faces, relief flooding the air around them. Keanu kept watch, scanning for movement. He knew it wasn't over. 2 kidnappers were still unaccounted for, and the FBI's backup hadn't yet arrived. As if on cue, a black tactical truck roared to life somewhere behind the warehouse. Headlights cut through the gloom, sweeping across the loading bay. Keanu stepped forward, placing himself between the approaching vehicle and Nadia and Anna. His voice was calm, but firm. "Stay behind me." The truck accelerated, its engine howling, and Keanu braced himself for the next clash. The park loomed ahead, a dark stretch of open space lit only by scattered lampposts. The air was damp, the grass glistening under the faint glow. Keanu slowed the SUV, pulling it into the cover of a cluster of trees. From there, he and Nadia could see the heart of the park, and the grim scene waiting for them. Anna sat on a metal bench beneath a flickering light, her wrists bound, her posture tense. 4 armed men stood around her, their rifles slung but ready. 2 more paced along the perimeter, scanning the shadows. Their movements were disciplined, almost military. This wasn't an ordinary gang. Nadia's breath caught. Her hands trembled against the dashboard. "She's right there. I can't just sit here." Keanu placed a steadying hand on her arm. "You'll get to her, but if we move now, they'll fire before you take 3 steps." He pulled a small device from his jacket, a rugged tablet linked to his private security network. On the screen, glowing dots represented approaching assets. High above the city, 2 helicopters were closing in, their pilots awaiting his signal. "We only get one chance," he said quietly. "When the rotors hit the air, they'll panic. That's when you run for Anna. I'll cover you." Nadia's eyes locked on the bench. "If they hurt her before I get there..." "They won't," Keanu cut in, his voice firm. "You have my word." The seconds stretched, each heartbeat pounding like a drum. Keanu's gaze never left the armed men, tracking their movements, waiting for the moment when their attention would fracture. Finally, his thumb pressed the command on the tablet. In the distance, the low thump of rotor blades began to grow, faint at first, then swelling into a deep, rapid rhythm. The guards stiffened, looking upward. A searchlight cut through the mist as the first helicopter swooped over the tree line, followed by the second from the opposite direction. Shouts erupted among the kidnappers. 2 men raised their weapons toward the sky, their focus splintering. Keanu glanced at Nadia. "Now, go." She bolted from the SUV, her feet pounding over wet grass, every muscle straining toward her daughter. And then, the first burst of gunfire cracked through the night. The gunfire ripped through the stillness, sharp and deafening. Muzzle flashes flared from the shadows, illuminating the twisted expressions of the men who had been moments from losing control of the situation. Bullets tore into the ground near Nadia's feet, clumps of earth exploding upward as she dove behind a low concrete planter. Keanu was already moving. He rolled from behind the SUV, his body low, using the chaos of the descending helicopters to mask his approach. One of the armed men spotted him and swung his rifle up, but Keanu fired first, a non-lethal round slamming into the man's chest with enough force to knock him backward. Another guard pivoted toward Nadia, his weapon rising. Keanu's voice thundered through the noise. "Nadia, stay down!" He took aim and struck the man's shoulder, sending his rifle spinning into the grass. The man dropped to his knees with a cry. The helicopters dipped lower, wind churning leaves and scattering debris across the park. The pounding rotor wash blinded the kidnappers, and their formation began to crumble. Through the confusion, Nadia crawled forward, her eyes locked on Anna's small figure. Anna's wide eyes searched the dark, then widened in recognition when she saw her mother. She struggled against the bindings, the rope cutting into her wrists. 2 guards regrouped near the bench, shouting orders in a language Nadia couldn't understand. One grabbed Anna by the arm, dragging her to her feet. The other aimed directly at Nadia. Keanu's boots hammered against the path as he closed the distance. He didn't hesitate. With a single motion, he shoulder-charged the gunman, sending both of them crashing into the dirt. The weapon skittered away into the night. Nadia reached the bench just as Anna was pulled clear by the second guard. Her hand shot out, grabbing Anna's other arm. For a split second, they were locked in a tug-of-war, mother against captor. The guard snarled, yanking harder, but then the roar of the second helicopter swept directly overhead, its floodlight blasting the scene in white brilliance. The guard flinched, blinded, and loosened his grip. Anna stumbled forward, straight into Nadia's embrace. And just as relief began to wash over them, a sharp whistle cut through the air. the signal for the remaining men to open fire. The whistle's echo had barely faded when a fresh hail of bullets tore through the air. Keanu dove sideways, pulling Nadia and Anna down behind the bench as splinters erupted from the wood. The whir of helicopter blades mixed with the sickening thud of rounds striking the ground just feet away. "Stay down!" Keanu shouted over the chaos, scanning the shadows for the shooters. His earpiece crackled with the voice of his security lead. "We have visuals on 3 more hostiles moving in from the north, covering you now." A spotlight swung to the far end of the park, catching 2 men mid-sprint. The sudden burst of light disoriented them, and Keanu took the chance to advance. He fired 2 quick, non-lethal shots, dropping both before they could get into position. The third man turned and fled toward the black tactical truck. Nadia clutched Anna, shielding her with her body as they moved toward a stone fountain for better cover. Anna's sobs were muffled against her mother's shoulder, but the sound only sharpened Nadia's determination. She wasn't going to lose her again. From above, ropes unspooled from one of the helicopters, and armed security operatives slid down with precision. They fanned out, systematically pushing back the kidnappers. The sound of boots pounding across the grass drew Keanu's attention. One of the men who had escaped earlier was returning, a knife in his hand and rage in his eyes. Keanu intercepted him mid-charge, twisting his wrist and sending the blade clattering to the pavement. A swift kick sent the man reeling backward into the arms of 2 operatives who restrained him. The fight was collapsing into pockets of resistance, the kidnappers realizing they were outmatched. Still, Keanu's focus never left Nadia and Anna. He waved them toward the extraction point, a waiting armored SUV parked under the cover of trees. They moved quickly, flanked by 2 operatives. Every second felt like a lifetime until they reached the vehicle. Nadia guided Anna inside, pulling the door shut just as another burst of gunfire cracked from behind them. The helicopters began to ascend, their floodlights sweeping the now clearing park. Keanu took one last look around, ensuring no one was left behind, then climbed into the SUV beside them. Only then did Nadia allow herself to exhale, not realizing the danger wasn't entirely over. The first thing Nadia felt was the warmth of sunlight pressing against her eyelids. She tried to shift, but was met with a sharp pain in her side, forcing her eyes open. The sterile white ceiling above told her immediately where she was. A faint beeping from the heart monitor kept time with her shallow breaths. For a moment, her mind raced to the park, the chaos, the gunfire, Anna's terrified face. Panic surged until a familiar voice pulled her back. "It's okay," Keanu said softly, from the chair beside her bed. "Anna's safe." "You're safe." Her eyes darted to the other side of the room, where Anna was curled up in an oversized blanket, fast asleep in an armchair. The sight made tears spill down Nadia's cheeks. "She's all right?" she whispered. Keanu nodded. A little shaken but not hurt. The doctors gave her something to help her rest. She tried to sit up, grimacing as the bandages along her ribcage tugged against her skin. Keanu reached out, steadying her with a gentle hand. "You took a graze from one of the rounds. Missed anything vital? But you'll need a few days of rest." The door opened and 2 FBI agents stepped in, their expressions both relieved and grim. The taller of the 2 spoke first. "Ms. Vulov, I'm Special Agent Carter. We wanted to update you on the operation's outcome." Nadia's fingers tightened around the blanket. "Please, tell me they got them." Carter exchanged a glance with his partner before replying. "We did. 23 arrests. The sweep hit multiple safe houses and storage facilities. We've effectively dismantled the remaining cells of the network tied to your husband's case." The weight of the word settled slowly over her. She had waited years for something like this. Justice not just for Victor, but for the countless others who had been silenced. Yet, instead of relief, she felt a strange emptiness, as though the victory couldn't replace what she had lost. Keanu seemed to sense her thoughts. "You don't have to decide what this means for you right now. For now, just breathe. You've survived what they tried to destroy you with." Nadia closed her eyes briefly, holding on to the sound of Anna's soft breathing. It was the only thing keeping her grounded in that moment. When Nadia opened her eyes again, the room was quieter. The agents had left, and Keanu sat by the window, speaking in a low voice on his phone. She caught fragments, words like evidence chain and witness protection. It reminded her that even here, in the sterile safety of the hospital, the danger wasn't entirely gone. Keanu noticed she was awake and ended the call. That was the Bureau. They're finalizing arrangements to keep you and Anna safe until the trials are over. She swallowed hard. Safe? Does that mean we'll have to move again? His gaze softened. Not unless you want to. The immediate threat is neutralized, but the FBI wants to make sure no loose ends come back to haunt you. Nadia looked toward Anna, still asleep, her face free of the fear she had worn at the park. I don't want her to live in hiding anymore, she said quietly. She's been running her whole life. Keanu leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. Then, maybe it's time to stop running. You've faced them, Nadia, and you won. Her mind drifted back to the final moments before she was hit. The blur of movement, the deafening rotors overhead, Anna's desperate cry for her. The pain in her ribs was nothing compared to the memory of nearly losing her daughter forever. A nurse entered with a clipboard, checking her vitals. You're healing well. We'll need to keep you overnight, but barring complications, you'll be discharged tomorrow. Tomorrow, Nadia repeated, as though the word carried a kind of promise. Once the nurse left, Keanu reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, weathered envelope. This was found in one of the network's offices. It's addressed to you. She took it with trembling hands. Her name was written in a familiar, looping script, Victor's handwriting. The edges of the paper were smudged and worn, as if it had been handled many times. I haven't read it, Keanu said softly. Figured that was yours alone. Nadia stared at the envelope, her pulse quickening. Somewhere in that folded paper was a voice she thought she'd never hear again. Nadia's fingers lingered on the envelope before she finally broke the seal. The scent of old paper rose faintly, and with it came a rush of memories. Evenings when Victor would write letters to friends abroad, always pausing to choose his words with care. She unfolded the single sheet inside. The handwriting was neat but hurried, as though written in a moment when time was slipping away. My dearest Nadia, it began. If you are reading this, then my fears have come true. I have stepped too far into a world where truth is a threat. You must take Anna and leave. Do not trust the officials who will come to help you. They are the same hands that close around my throat. Her eyes blurred, but she forced herself to keep reading. If I fall, know this. It was for something bigger than myself. I wanted Anna to grow up in a world where speaking the truth is not a death sentence. If Keanu Reeves finds you, trust him. He is not part of their game. He will help you finish what I could not. Her breath caught at the mention of Keanu's name. She looked up at him, stunned. He knew you? Before all this? Keanu's brow furrowed. Not directly, but I helped fund journalists' protection programs overseas. I guess Victor was aware. The letter ended with a final plea. Don't let them bury my story. One day, tell Anna who her father was. Not as a victim, but as a man who refused to bend. Nadia pressed the paper to her chest, holding it there as if it could somehow bridge the years and bring Victor back. Keanu gave her a moment before speaking. We have the network's servers. Every file, every name, every payment trail. The FBI will make it public. Tears streaked her cheeks, but there was a steadiness in her voice now. Then his death won't be just another line in their records. It will mean something. From the bed beside her, Anna stirred, opening her eyes. Mom, she whispered. Nadia reached for her hand. I'm here, baby. And we're not running anymore. 3 days later, the air in the hospital room felt lighter, though Nadia still bore the soreness from her injuries. The door opened quietly, and Keanu stepped in, a folder in his hand. He greeted her with a warm smile, but there was a weight in his eyes that hinted at the gravity of what he was about to share. "I just came from a meeting with the FBI and the Justice Department," he began, pulling up a chair. "It's over, Nadia. The network's leaders are in custody. Their accounts have been frozen. We've recovered more than $40 million in seized assets." She blinked in disbelief. "40 million?" He nodded. "And that's just the first wave. Once the international partners finish their audits, the total will be much higher. The important thing is, this money isn't going back into their pockets." Nadia's brow furrowed. "Then where will it go?" Keanu laid the folder on her lap and opened it. Inside were neatly printed pages, an outline, and a draft mission statement. The words at the top read, "The Victor Moroz Foundation." Her breath caught. "Victor's name?" "I thought it was right," Keanu said softly. "This foundation will be dedicated to supporting the families of whistleblowers, those who risk everything to expose corruption and abuse. It will offer financial aid, legal protection, relocation assistance, everything Victor would have wanted for you and Anna, and for others like you." Her fingers traced the letters of her late husband's name. The idea felt powerful, noble, yet overwhelming. "Keanu, I'm not sure I can do this. I'm not a leader, I'm just—" "You're exactly the kind of leader this needs," he interrupted gently. "Someone who understands the cost. Someone who won't let these families be forgotten or abandoned." She looked away, wrestling with the thought. "It's too big, too much responsibility. I wouldn't even know where to begin." From the chair by the window, Anna spoke up, her voice steady despite her youth. "Mom, you can do it. Dad would want you to. He didn't just fight for himself. He fought for people who couldn't fight back. Now you can finish what he started." Nadia turned toward her daughter, meeting eyes that carried so much of Victor's spirit. She felt a quiet shift inside, a spark she hadn't realized she still had. The room fell into a thoughtful silence. Nadia's fingers tightened around the folder, as if holding on to it might steady the whirlwind inside her. She had come to the United States to protect her daughter, to disappear, not to step into the light again. But now, after everything, maybe hiding was no longer enough. Keanu leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "You wouldn't be doing this alone. I have contacts, resources, people I trust who can help set up the infrastructure. The FBI liaison already agreed to connect you with other survivors who might want to contribute. This could change lives, Nadia." Her eyes searched his. "Why me? There are other people, experienced people, who could run this better." "Because they don't have your story," Keanu replied without hesitation. "When you speak, people will listen, not because of the foundation's name, but because you lived it. You know the fear, the loss, and the strength it takes to keep going. No one can fake that." Anna came closer, perching on the edge of the bed. "Mom, think about all the families who won't have to go through what we did. You always told me that if we could help someone, we should. Well, now we can help a lot of someones." Nadia let out a shaky breath. Her daughter's words pierced through the fog of doubt. She had taught Anna to be brave, but somewhere along the way, she had stopped believing she could be brave herself. Keanu opened the folder further, revealing preliminary plans for scholarships, emergency housing programs, and legal defense funds. "We could launch in 6 months. The money is ready. The legal framework is already being drafted. All it needs is someone with the heart to make sure it stays true to its mission." Her hand lingered on a photograph paperclipped to the last page. Victor, holding a much younger Anna, both laughing under a golden autumn tree. It wasn't just a memory. It was a reminder of the man who had risked everything to do what was right. She swallowed hard. "If I do this, it has to be done properly. No compromises, no politics, no forgetting why it exists." Keanu smiled, relief and respect mingling in his expression. Then you're already the right person for the job. Anna reached out, taking her mother's hand. Dad would be proud of you, Mom, she said softly. He didn't get the chance to keep fighting, but you can. The words settled deep in Nadia's chest, heavy but steadying. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the truth in them. Victor had stood against something vast and ruthless, knowing it could cost him everything. And it had. Now, she realized, his fight didn't have to end in that cold river. It could live on in every life the Foundation touched. Keanu leaned back, giving her space to decide, but his presence was reassuring. He wasn't pushing her out of obligation. He genuinely believed she was the one who could carry this torch. I'll do it, Nadia finally said, her voice quiet but firm. But not for me, for Victor, and for everyone else whose voices were silenced. Keanu nodded once, the faintest smile lifting the edge of his mouth. Then we start tomorrow. Anna grinned, a mix of pride and relief shining in her eyes. Can I help too, maybe volunteer after school? Of course, Nadia replied, pulling her daughter into a hug. This will be for families like ours. Families who need to know they're not alone. In the days that followed, the hospital room became a kind of planning hub. Keanu brought in trusted contacts, legal experts, and security consultants. Nadia began sketching out programs that would meet immediate needs. Safe relocation, emergency medical aid, counseling for trauma survivors. Each page she wrote felt like reclaiming a piece of herself that fear had stolen. Every so often she'd glance at that photo of Victor and Anna, now taped to the wall beside her bed. It reminded her why there could be no shortcuts, no bending to pressure. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the city skyline, Keanu returned with the final documents. It's official, he said, handing her the signed papers. The Viktor Mikhailov Foundation is born. Nadia traced the embossed lettering on the folder, her throat tight. Then let's make sure it's not just a name on paper. Let's make it matter. Keanu extended his hand. Together. She clasped it without hesitation. Together. The cold air of Kiev carried the scent of winter wood smoke as Nadia stepped out of the car, her boots crunching on the thin layer of frost. Keanu walked beside her, a hand lightly on her shoulder, steadying her against the icy pavement. In the distance, the newly built Viktor Vulov School of Science and Mathematics stood tall, its glass facade catching the pale morning light. Children in brightly colored coats were gathered near the entrance, holding handmade signs in Ukrainian that read, "Thank you," and "In honor of Victor." Teachers kept them in neat lines, but the excitement was palpable. Nadia took in the sight with a lump in her throat. She had been part of every meeting, every architectural choice, but seeing it now, complete and alive with the voices of students, was overwhelming. This wasn't just a building, it was a statement that knowledge, truth, and courage would outlast fear and silence. Inside the main hall, a crowd had gathered. Parents, educators, and local officials stood alongside journalists, their cameras ready to capture the moment. The walls were lined with photographs of Ukrainian scientists and mathematicians, and at the far end hung a large portrait of Victor, smiling faintly as if proud of the day's events. Keanu guided Nadia toward the podium. "They want you to speak first," he whispered, his voice warm, not as an organizer, but as his sister. Her heart pounded. She gripped the edge of the wooden lectern, looking out over the sea of expectant faces. "My brother believed," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion rising in her chest, "that truth is a light. And once it is lit, it cannot be hidden forever. This school will be that light for generations to come." The audience was silent, hanging on her words. She spoke of Victor's passion for learning, his belief in giving the next generation tools to question, discover, and protect what is right. She thanked the community for embracing the project, for making Victor's dream a reality, in the very soil he loved. When she stepped back, applause filled the hall, echoing off the high ceilings. She felt Keanu's quiet nod of approval beside her. And then, through the crowd, she saw a young man, tall with dark hair and eyes that mirrored Victor's, making his way toward her. The young man paused a few feet away, uncertain, his hands buried deep in the pockets of a navy winter coat. Nadia's breath caught as she took in the familiar lines of his face, the sharp jaw, the quiet intensity in his eyes. Keanu stepped forward, bridging the gap with a gentle smile. "You must be Dmitri," he said softly. The boy nodded, his voice hesitant. "Yes, I'm Dmitri Vulov. My parents told me you wanted to meet." Nadia's eyes shimmered. "Your father was my brother," she said, the words trembling on her lips. "Victor was more than family. He was my hero." Dmitri shifted his weight, clearly overwhelmed. "I didn't know much about him until recently. My parents, they thought it was safer not to talk about it when I was younger. But now I've read the files you sent, and I've seen the videos." He looked up, his gaze steady now. "I think I understand what he stood for." She stepped closer, resisting the urge to pull him into an embrace too soon. "He would have wanted you to know, and he would have been proud of you." Dmitri glanced at the walls filled with science projects created by the first wave of students. "This school, it feels like him. Like he's still here, teaching." Keanu, standing beside them, watched the exchange with quiet respect. He knew this was more than a reunion. It was a bridge between the past and the future. "Dmitri," he said gently, "this building carries your uncle's name, but his real legacy is in the choices people make because of him. That includes you." For a long moment the boy was silent, processing the weight of those words. Then, almost shyly, he reached into his coat and pulled out a worn leather notebook. "This was his," Dmitri explained. "It was found in a box when my parents moved to California. I think it belongs with you." Nadia accepted the notebook with trembling hands, her fingertips tracing the creases in the cover. The room seemed to fade around her. She could almost hear Victor's voice, urging her to keep pushing, to keep fighting for what mattered. Blood skittered. Nadia carefully opened the notebook, its pages filled with Victor's unmistakable handwriting, a mix of equations, sketches, and fragments of thoughts. Some were technical notes, but others were deeply personal, almost like letters never sent. One page stopped her cold. At the top, in bold letters, Victor had written, "For the day I meet my nephew." Beneath it, a short message. "The world can be cruel, but it can also be changed. Be the one who chooses the second path." Her throat tightened as she turned the notebook toward Dmitri. "He wrote this for you," she whispered. Dmitri's eyes glistened, his fingers brushing the paper as if it were something sacred. "I don't know if I can live up to that," he admitted quietly. "You already are," Keanu said, his voice steady. "Just by wanting to try." The three of them stood there in the quiet hall, the faint hum of students' voices echoing from another wing. Outside, the Ukrainian winter painted the courtyard in white, but inside, the warmth was palpable. A group of children peeked around a corner, giggling when they were spotted. Nadia waved them over, introducing Dmitri as Victor's nephew. Their eyes lit up, and one little boy offered him a handmade model rocket from the school's science club. Dmitri accepted it, his smile growing for the first time that day. "I think I want to come back here," Dmitri said, turning to Nadia. "Not just today, to help teach, maybe share what I'm learning in California." Nadia felt her heart swell. "That would mean more than you know." As the dedication ceremony began, Keanu took a step back, watching Nadia and Dmitri stand together before the school's new plaque. The bronze letters gleamed in the winter light. Victor Vulov, School of Science and Mathematics. His blood broke. The tracking stopped through The ribbon was cut, cheers rang out, and Keanu couldn't help but feel that Victor was somehow there, smiling in approval. In that moment, the school was more than just a building. It was proof that truth could survive violence, that family could survive distance, and that even after the darkest chapters, there could be beginnings. And for Nadia, holding her nephew's hand as the applause roared, it was the start of a new story, one Victor had hoped for all along. The hall of the United Nations shimmered under the glow of chandeliers, its vast expanse filled with diplomats, journalists, and activists from around the globe. Flags from every nation lined the walls, each one a silent witness to the promises made within these chambers. At the podium stood Nadia, poised yet visibly moved. A year had passed since the violent events that had nearly taken her life and stolen her daughter. Now she was no longer just a survivor. She had become an advocate, a voice for those too afraid to speak. Her speech began with the weight of lived experience. "When truth is punished, corruption thrives," she said, her words steady, carrying across the hushed hall. "I know, because I saw it, I lived it, and I nearly died for it." She spoke of the whistleblowers who had been silenced, imprisoned, or forced into hiding. She told stories of the families left behind, the children growing up without parents because someone dared to expose the powerful. Each sentence seemed to pull the room tighter into her orbit. Keanu sat in the front row beside Anna and Dimitri. He watched her with a quiet pride that came from knowing the cost of her courage. Anna's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes glistening as her mother's voice filled the room. Dimitri leaned forward, listening with the intent focus of someone who understood that her fight had also become his. The applause grew louder with each powerful point, but Nadia pressed on. "We cannot protect democracy if we cannot protect the truth-tellers. We cannot protect the truth-tellers if we cannot protect their families." She spoke of the new foundation they had built with the seized assets of the network they'd dismantled. It was already helping dozens of families relocate, offering them legal support and a chance at a new life. "It is not enough," she said, her voice firm. "The world must do more. We must make it impossible for those in power to silence the voices that hold them accountable." When she finished, the hall erupted in a standing ovation. Cameras flashed, delegates rose from their seats. Keanu glanced at Anna and Dimitri. Both were smiling. For the first time in a long time, it felt like peace. But peace was not the whole truth. As the applause softened, Nadia stepped down from the podium. Keanu rose to meet her halfway, his hand lightly resting at her back as she made her way toward their seats. The weight of the moment was not lost on any of them. For months, they had worked tirelessly to turn their ordeal into a movement. This speech was supposed to be a milestone, a turning point. But even before they could sit, Keanu felt a shift in the room. His instincts, honed from years of navigating both the glare of Hollywood and the shadows of danger, told him something was wrong. His gaze swept across the sea of faces, past the rows of suited diplomats and translators in glass booths. And then he saw him. In the far corner of the gallery seating, half hidden behind a column, sat Marcus Webb. The once prominent FBI official had been at the heart of the corruption they had helped expose. Official records claimed he was facing multiple charges. Yet here he was, relaxed, well-dressed, and free. His sharp eyes were fixed on Nadia, the faintest trace of a smirk playing at his lips. Keanu's jaw tightened. It wasn't just Webb's presence that chilled him. It was the quiet confidence in his demeanor, the way he sat there as though the entire speech had been for his entertainment. Nadia followed Keanu's gaze, her breath caught in her throat. The man who had orchestrated so much of her pain, who had pulled strings in the shadows to destroy lives, was here, watching her. Anna noticed too. Her fingers tightened around her mother's arm. Dimitri's brow furrowed in confusion, sensing the tension but not yet understanding the history Keanu leaned closer to Nadia, speaking so only she could hear. He shouldn't be here. He shouldn't even be free. Her eyes stayed locked on Webb. If he's here, it means someone wanted me to see him. They both knew this was no coincidence. Webb wasn't hiding. He was sending a message. That despite everything they'd done, the fight was far from over. Keanu's voice was calm but edged with steel. This time, we don't run. We fight. Nadia drew in a slow, steady breath, feeling the pulse of the room fade into the background. Every instinct told her to confront Webb immediately, but she knew that would play into his hands. This was a man who thrived on chaos, on baiting his opponents into reckless moves. Keanu's steady presence beside her grounded her. His eyes, sharp but unwavering, told her that they would choose their moment, and when it came, it would be on their terms. The rest of the session passed in a blur. Nadia answered polite congratulations, shook hands with ambassadors, and posed for photos, all the while keeping Webb in the corner of her vision. He never moved, never spoke, never broke his gaze. When the assembly adjourned, he was gone. No one had seen him leave, no trace. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the plaza. Anna walked between Keanu and Nadia, her hand clutching her mother's. Dmitri trailed a few steps behind, absorbing the weight of what had just happened. Keanu stopped at the steps, looking out toward the city. If Webb is free, he's not just a threat to us. He's a threat to every whistleblower out there. This isn't just about settling old scores. It's about making sure no one else goes through what you did. Nadia met his eyes. Then we make sure he can't hurt anyone again. A quiet determination settled over them. They had already faced danger, betrayal, and loss, and survived. Now, they would turn that survival into something more. Not just defense, action. As they walked toward the waiting car, the thought of Victor flickered in Nadia's mind. She imagined him watching, approving of their resolve. The safe Keanu had left open that morning so many months ago came back to her. The moment that had tested her honesty, her courage, and her will to trust again. It had never just been about the money inside. It had been about opening something far more dangerous and far more precious, a fight for truth that wasn't over. And as Keanu closed the car door behind them, his voice was quiet but certain. This time, we write the ending.